Hi, I'm Judy Farrell and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. This episode's the fourth in my short series, Ashtanga Love Notes, where I talk with friends who, like me, still practice and teach Ashtanga and still love it too. Because I feel Ashtanga's fallen a bit out of fashion and gets a bit of a bad rep for being too difficult, too rigid and, well, just old-fashioned. But we'll talk about what we love, what keeps us coming back, and what challenges and highlights it's brought us along the way. Imagine these love notes handwritten and held close to my heart. My guest on this episode is very good friend and very favourite Australian Allison Dearling. Alison's the founder and principal of Live and Breathe Yoga in Townsville, North Queensland. She opened her studio in 2010 after returning home to Australia from Scotland. Via Goa, if I'm remembering correctly, where we had an amazing 2 months together practising with the late Rolf Nadjikat and his wife Marcy. But that's probably another story for another day. Alison's been practising Ashtanga Yoga since she was 21. A serious car accident in her teens left her with significant injury and pain, and she credits her recovery to her Ashtanga Yoga practice. We met on our yoga teacher training programme here in Glasgow back in 2005, and since then have done a lot of yoga together, drank a lot of tea, laughed loads, and shared so many adventures that I can't even begin to count. In this conversation, we talk about what brought Alison to Ashtanga Yoga, the challenges as well as the rewards of practice, what keeps us coming back, and how it all helps us navigate the world beyond our yoga mat. Alison says, "It's so interesting what we learn about ourselves in the process. How do we deal with that? And how do we modify? How do we change? And then when we can finally do that posture that we thought was impossible, you're like, well, if I can do that, then maybe I can do this thing over here that I think is impossible too." I couldn't even think about doing a podcast series called Ashtanga Love Notes without talking to Alison. I honestly don't think I'd be where I am today if we hadn't met. I still miss having her here, so I'm really excited to share our friendship and this conversation with you. Alison, thank you so much for joining me, for making this work all the way from Townsville in Australia, where it is currently, 5 a.m?
It's 5 a.m. now, but I had to get up at about 3:15 to be here so we could have a big chat before, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, but we have been chatting since 4 a.m, so I hope you have a good sturdy cuppa with you.
I don't
Good
actually, but
builder's tea.
I should have one, but yeah, I will be getting a very strong cup of coffee later, probably a few today to get me through the day.
Yeah. So I feel I couldn't do a podcast series called Ashtanga Love Notes without talking to you. And the reason is that without you, I don't know if I would have stuck at it. Like, without your encouragement to come to class, to go to all these workshops, to have these crazy yoga adventures, and just all your kind of general cheerleading along the way. And so much so that after you left to go home to Australia, it took me a bit of time to figure out if this Ashtanga thing was something that we did together, or if it was actually something that I was doing for myself. So thank you for joining me. Without you, I wouldn't be here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited, and I so loved our time when I lived in Glasgow. It's probably one of the best times in my life, if I'm honest. Yeah, we did I was thinking about how I kind of tricked you into a workshop in London that we did, remember, with Matthew Sweeney, and it was an intermediate series workshop. And when he announced it, you looked at me across from your yoga mat like, what? I'm like, it's fine. We'll be right. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I think safe to say those early days of Ashtanga was love, hate, fear, lots of things combined. So just to give people an idea, we met on our yoga teacher training program with June
2005. Yep.
2005, yes, and that was my first meeting with the Ashtanga practice as well. But I think you had been practicing before then.
Yes,
So
I had
maybe
practiced a
tell us,
little
like, how
bit.
did you start? How did you find Ashtanga?
Well, I was in Townsville and I was 21, and I say this story to a lot of my students that I knew Madonna was practicing Ashtanga yoga, and I'm a huge fan. And I think a lot of people got into it back then in the late 90s, early 2000s. And a little flyer came across my desk at work, and it was like introduction to Ashtanga yoga. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the yoga that Madonna does. I have to go and do this. And I did this introduction course at this tiny little studio down the road. And yeah, it just blew my mind. It was so hard. I'd been in a car accident before that, so I couldn't do any. Had been going to the gym to rehab from my injuries, but I couldn't put any weight in my wrist because I'd broken both my arms, and so it was so hard, and I had very little flexibility left. But I just remember at the end of that class, I just felt so good, but not just good. It was more like me. Like I felt like me again, like that I hadn't felt that feeling in so long. And that's what keeps bringing me back to my yoga mat. That's 25 years ago. I don't even know. I don't even want to do the maths of how old I am now, but
No.
yeah, that's what keeps bringing me back. That just general level of I'm okayness that brings me back every time. So yeah, I had done a little bit before I came to Glasgow, but funnily enough, I couldn't find an Ashtanga class for a few years once I got there. I kept sort of Googling and looking. And then eventually I found, the Chi Yoga Centre, which is now Merchant City Yoga. So, and very quickly got ushered into the teacher training program where we met because I started late, because I convinced the teachers that I asked if I could join. They said no. June said no. And then I met her and she said, yes, you need to be on this course. So all of a sudden I'm on this course and I sit next to you on the yoga mat, and we sort of become best mates, like instantly.
Absolutely. Ashtanga buddies as well.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, because I mean, like I say, it's it's a bit of a cliche actually, but when you read like all these articles and it's all the advice about sticking to habits, and it's all about going with a friend and arranging to meet somebody there, and like I just, because it was really challenging and confronting as a practice. I mean, I remember my first full-led primary. I think I've told this story before on here. It was like a proper car crash. Like I'd never seen anything like it. And at one point it was during the kind of back end of the primary, so the posters that come after those tricky posters in the middle. I just burst out laughing because I think if I wasn't going to laugh, I was probably
You'll be crying.
And that way that you look around and you think everyone's just knocking this out of the park. Everyone's nailing it apart from you.
Oh,
And yeah, so to have some, what would we call it, encouragement,
yes,
as well as some trickery, because
to
I
keep
think,
going. Yeah,
and for me as well, like I'd never quite come across anything like it. That kind of feeling of everyone in it together, and
yeah,
culture of going to guest teachers, and like we went to London for that famous workshop that I didn't know what I was getting into,
yeah.
but I'd like that never even really
It
occurred
was
to me that
so.
that was the thing.
Yeah, I know, it was so fun, and I was there just going, oh my God, there's all these amazing teachers, like literally in London, and we're just up the road in Scotland. Like we have to go. And then we went to Edinburgh a few times, and
Yeah,
so many amazing teachers came to Glasgow, then, and it was just like, because I'm from North Queensland, where nobody ever comes here. So, the fact that there were these teachers actually coming in and, we were able to book in and go was just like so incredible. So I took every opportunity and I just dragged you along with me, which was just so much part of the fun. So yeah, thank you for saying yes to all my crazy ideas.
Well, look where it's got me.
Look
Doing
where you are.
doing stuff I never thought possible. Um,
Yeah.
so tell me, what do you think are some of the things that are most misunderstood about Ashtanga?
Oh, there's a lot. I think it's the people say that it's very rigid. People say that it's really hard. People say that it's only for boys. I don't know if people say that anymore, but that was a thing for a long time. Um,
Yeah, I think if you're on the socials, it's still
Still
wheeled
there.
out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like haven't we got over that yet? But yeah, I think all the things that are said about it could be said for anything, but unfortunately it does get a bad rap for that, for the mainly the rigidity of it, I think. But you know, all the teachers that have learnt from, and um, even Sharat when he was teaching, when someone was struggling with something, he would actually go to them and change it and modify. And all the teachers that I've taught with and learnt from, you know, everything's modified, do what you can, change it where you need to. And that's definitely how I've always taught it as well. If you need a block, then use a block. Don't let the rigidity of the practice get in the way of getting the benefit from the postures. Using that beautiful sequence and that beautiful flow and that beautiful focus with, Tristana, using that to our advantage, but also not letting I have to do it a certain way. And if I'm not doing the full primary series, then I'm not doing it properly.
Mm,
And because it never ends, right? There's primary series, yes, and then there's intermediate, but it's just a way to kind of organize it into smaller chunks so that you can fit it in. But it's a continuous big line of postures that it never ends. And I think I think people think it gets boring as well. That's something else. And, we know it never gets boring. And
never.
actually, I would love for a boring practice. How nice would that be?
I know. Just same old, you know.
Same old, same old. It's different every time because our bodies are changing all the time. And to have something to come back to each day, to be able to compare to and get some knowledge around, okay, well, what is happening in my body? Is it because of the way I was sleeping last night? Or is it because of, I'm stressed at work, or, I'm actually not getting on my mat as much as I hope, that I can really feel it in my body. So I think all the things that are criticisms of the practice can easily be changed through common sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I always think all of the kind of criticisms, if you like, and misunderstandings, they
Mm.
do have an element of truth. They're valid,
Yeah.
but perhaps taken out of context. I just wanted to pick up on something that you said there about the series, because one of the things
Mm.
that I've heard a few times just recently is that Ashtanga is this sequence of postures. And I feel myself getting a little bit riled by it because it feels very reductionist.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
say, but I mean, I guess like to talk to this kind of modern yoga world that we're living in,
Mm.
if where you're getting your information is off the socials and the Google sphere,
Mm.
what you're seeing is going to be a little bit skewed. And I think for me, one of the things that I find particularly effective about this yoga method is the fact that it's not just the postures. There's other stuff in the method that sits alongside the postures that makes it all work a lot
Yes.
better and be a lot more effective as a kind of yoga method.
So beautifully. Yeah. And yeah, it is a sequence, but that's not everything. That's not the whole story, right? There's
Yeah, and it's
Tristana.
not and it's not a perfect sequence either. Like,
No,
I've
no,
I've
no,
seen
nothing.
like, but there is no such thing as a perfect sequence. It gives us,
Every system has its drawbacks, you know, nothing is ever
yeah,
going to be perfect, but it's a system of learning such a wide variety of postures in a nice sequential order that, you know, sometimes makes sense. There's a few pieces in the
yeah,
order that I would maybe change around a little bit, but I think sticking to something and just seeing what happens is so important than just coming in, trying it a few times and then questioning it because it seems strange or rigid, you know, to keep at it, to see that there's so much more to it.
yeah. I mean, because one of the things I keep coming back to is to get good at something, you need to keep doing it. It's like the repetition is the is a piece of it.
Oh, it's a big piece
Um,
of that. Yeah, for sure. I
yeah,
mean, you don't expect to go and play tennis and hit a few shots and then become an expert, right? And any pro in their field of any movement, sport or music or anything like that, they always practice the basics. Like that's the main part of their training, is always the basics, those drills, those things that they do over and over and over again, so they become easy and
yeah,
almost you know, without thinking, they can easily find that flow, right? And that's the whole point of yoga, is, you know, postures are to be steady and easy. That's what the sutras say, you know, sukham stiram asanam, you know, like the same steadiness and ease with the practice, and that only comes when you repeat things.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's something interesting as well about um meeting the stuff that you can and can't do every time. It's like I mean, albeit we can adapt the practice to reflect like how we are in on any one day, but
Yes.
broadly speaking, the structure's the same. So we meet the ones that we like and the ones that we don't like the same number of times every time.
Yeah.
So there's something kind of interesting in that as well, isn't there, about getting to know ourselves and how we do that. And
Oh,
again, I think that butts interestingly up against this modern yoga landscape where a lot of the information's on the socials. And so what
yeah.
we want is to get from here to there in one, two, or three easy steps.
Yeah, it's all about hacks and getting
Yeah.
there quickly and yeah, all that. Yeah. And it's exactly what you said there. It's, you know, Ashtanga and in the sequence doesn't allow us just to skip over things that are hard. It forces you to confront yourself within those hard postures and notice, okay, well, okay, when I get to this posture that is impossible, like I feel like this is impossible for me, and this has happened to me so many times. I've come up against a posture and I'm like, well, this is the one, like I'm never going to be able to do this one. And then it's noticing my reaction to that is where I have learnt so much about myself. You know, my normal
Yeah.
reaction to those hard postures is, oh well, that's dumb, like that posture is stupid, you know,
What's
it's
the
not me,
point?
it's the posture, you know. This
Yeah.
grandiosity that I have, you know, like, well, it's not me, you know, it's the posture. And I noticed that that's how I am with other things that challenge me, you know. It's like, oh well, it's not me, it's you, you know, or it's that thing. And I'm like, well, that's not entirely true, Alison. Like, you know, maybe you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? So and it's interesting how people react. You know, I see it all the time in my students. You know, they come up against a hard posture, and some students will just then bash and go, keep going and doing it and doing it and doing it until they get it, you know. And then other students will be like, oh, I'll just bail, like I'll just skip it, or I won't do that anymore, or I won't even do yoga anymore because that was just too hard, right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting to see our reactions when we come up against those things that are challenging, that we don't like, we feel like they're impossible, because we're going to meet people like that outside, right? We're going to come up against people that we don't really get on with, but sometimes we have to because they're our boss or they're our family or they're people we have to deal with. So how are we going to be in that moment in a way that we're proud of, and that we're not you know, forgetting our values and that kind of thing?
Yeah. And like people make us things that make us question our beliefs about ourselves as well. Like I'd say that's a massive one for me and Ashtanga.
Hugely, yeah. And
Yeah.
then and there's something so powerful in coming up against a posture that's really difficult. And I'm not talking about something that's difficult because of an injury or, you know, something that's happened, because I've been injured my whole yoga life, like from my car accident that I had. So there's definitely limitations with injury, but you
Yeah.
know, it's just so interesting how what we learn about ourselves in the process, you know, and how do we deal with that, and how do we modify, and how do we change. And then when we can finally do that posture that we thought was impossible, you're like, well, if I can do that, then maybe I can do this thing over here that I think's impossible, you know?
So what I thought you were going to say there was, yeah, once I finally, after all of this work, get to do this posture that I didn't think was possible, then there's just another one that's equally impossible on the other side of
Well,
it.
exactly right. Then there's another one down the track for sure. Yeah. But take the win while you can, and then apply it to your life, and then keep going. Yeah, it's so good. And I see it all the time with my students. They come and they think, oh, I'm not ever going to be able to do this. And then, you know, it's only through consistency and through that repetition that change happens, and that confidence in themselves. That's what I'm all about, you know, helping people find that confidence no matter what's gone on in their body in the past, figuring out, and learning slowly to trust their body, to have the confidence again in their body. And then, yeah, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, definitely. It's an incredible thing to watch, but also an incredible thing to experience as well. You know,
Amazing.
I was bringing you up to speed about all my injury stories before we started recording, so I won't hang on, but I think it's a really interesting process,
Mm.
especially as a teacher, coming up against that limitation and having to kind of unravel a lot of what you thought you understood about how to do things and how to practice in your practice, and how you seen yourself in that role of
Mm.
practitioner, and how you see yourself in that role of teacher
Yeah.
um, as well. Like it seems to me that whenever something like that happens, there's a lot of unraveling to do.
And that's a big part of the process too, unraveling. You know, the practice is sort of it's that mirror practice, right? We're
Mm,
slowly clearing that mirror to be able to see ourselves more clearly. And yeah, being able to overcome an injury is yeah is a lot of unraveling in the process, you know, and being willing to let go of postures that you maybe were able to do quite easily, and now there's just you can't do them anymore. And how does that feel, you know, because eventually we're not going to be able to do a lot of things as we get into our 90s maybe. But you know, like, I think being willing to experiment too, you know, like when I've had injuries and I've thought, okay, well, my, you know, years ago I hurt my back, and then once I had Elsie, my back played up a lot, and I sort of thought, oh well, it must be back bends that are causing me issues. So I can't do them anymore, which is like for me, okay, I'm not going to do them anymore, and then I'll be right. And then that didn't fix it, you know. And then I'm like, okay, well,
yeah.
maybe it's I can't do forward bends. Okay, I'll really limit those, and I just sort of cut a lot of those out or did them very differently. Well, that didn't work either. Okay, and now I'm doing both, right? Again, so it's taken that process of elimination and cutting things out, really reducing it down, to then build it back up and to see with experimentation and curiosity and faith. That's the
Yeah,
key.
that's a big
Faith.
thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
faith in my own body. And I only
yeah,
take that from my previous experience of being able to not do things, and now I can do things. You know, now I can do handstands, whereas I couldn't do them before because of upper body stuff. So, you know, you have to think back and use the past to guide the future as well.
yeah, and it's not a blind faith either.
No,
It,
no,
you know,
definitely not.
that's not it um at all. So what do you think keeps you coming back to this Ashtanga thing?
What keeps me coming back to this thing? I remember years ago when we were sitting in the old studio,
Yeah.
and I remember someone
Probably
asked us,
with like 20 sweaters on because it was so cold.
it was freezing. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd always get in trouble for turning all the heaters on and everyone would complain. But I remember David was in town, David Kyle, and someone asked him, what happens when, you're not getting anywhere and you feel like you just don't want to do it anymore. And I was expecting him to say something, well, just keep getting on your mat and da 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 da. And he said, you know what? Quit. And he told that person to quit. He
Remember
said,
that
just
too.
quit. You remember that? And he said,
Yes.
quit. And I'm like, huh? What do you mean quit? And he said, if you quit any money, you'll come back to it. And it's true, right? There's been times when Elsie
Yeah.
was really little and I couldn't practice anywhere near as much as I could because I was near mum. And I didn't really quit it, but I couldn't do it in a way that I was doing it. But I just kept coming back to it when it just had this pull. And now it's just such like an old friend. It's so dear to me and it's so comforting. And it's still hard and everything like that and challenging. And I don't want to do it when I'm tired and I'm stiff and I just want to go and have a coffee. But I think the feeling of, oh yeah, there I am. I'm still there, despite all the challenges of life, of being a grown up in the world and being a mum and being a business owner and being a wife and trying to be a friend and, never feel like you're doing any of it well. That feeling of, oh yeah, I'm still in there, like there I am. And that's what keeps bringing me back. That same feeling I had that very first day is still there every time I practice. Every time I lay down at the end and rest, and I'm like, oh yeah, there I am again. Yeah. So that's what keeps me coming back. Nothing else I've done ever makes me feel like that.
I think that is a perfect place to finish. Um, yeah, because it's a kind of funny thing, isn't it? Like because we've talked about how difficult it is and how challenging it is, and
Yeah.
um, the challenges of doing such a big physical practice,
Mm.
but trying to do that, in tandem with the other threads of the method as well, and like I find it endlessly intriguing why when we've got every excuse or reason not to,
Mm.
something keeps drawing me back in. Like, there's something in there that
Yeah.
just keeps drawing me back in just to see what I can do, just to see how that is. And
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I think partly I'm still a little bit of, yeah, I used to be able to insert, whatever posture
Oh, for
here.
sure.
Um, but there's a curiosity around, is there anything I can do to find my way back there? And it's going to be different this time and learning lots of stuff along the way.
Mm.
But yeah, I find it endlessly intriguing about what it is about certain people as well that keeps them coming back. Because like you said, some people try it and think it's not for them because it's too hard, or they think it's going to be boring doing the same thing. So they think it's not for them. But yeah,
Mm.
but for some of us, yeah, there's just something.
Yeah, and I could actually say that because it is hard and because it is the same thing, that's one of the things that keeps me coming back, that it is
You
hard.
think,
I think I like the challenge of it. I think it's fantastic life is hard. So what are we going to
yeah,
just say, oh, life's too hard, that's it? Well,
yeah, it's not for me.
that's not how I'm going to do things. So I feel like, yeah, the practice is hard, but I think life is way harder without it,
Yeah,
and I'm using the practice to keep myself physically mobile and moving in all directions, upside down, sideways, twisting everywhere, so that when I can age gracefully, you know, and still be strong and peaceful when I'm older, no matter what. So it's sort of a training for that, really.
Yeah, and navigating a bit. So are you saying that as yoga practitioners here, we're not going to turn into cranky old women who just speak their mind? Just rude.
Oh, well, you know, we're already that, but maybe we'll do it with a little bit more grace.
Yeah, do it with one leg behind our head. That's what we'll do. Alison, thank you so much for joining me. I know you're heading into class now, so have a very lovely class. And yeah, still remember very fondly meeting all your people out there when I was out there. They looked after me really well all those years ago.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute honor to be here with you, and yeah, just wishing everyone back in Glasgow some good practice opportunities, and hopefully I'll see everyone again soon.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I still can't quite believe that Alison got up at 3:15 in the morning to have this chat before she taught class, but I'm so glad she did. I speak from experience when I say that there's a super warm welcome waiting for you at Alison's studio if you ever find yourself in Townsville. It's a proper home away from home. These conversations are unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles at the beginning and the end of every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help other people find us too. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.